Good luck, everybody.
Hello, and welcome to this afternoon's Short Story Awards Contest announcement. I'm Rick Sickinger, Programming Chair for the Alice Munro Festival of the Short Story. When I'm not doing this, my day job is as Tourism Development Officer for the County of Huron, where I have the pleasure of promoting Huron County as a great visitor destination. We'll hope you come and visit sometime if you're not from Huron County. The Alice Munro Festival of the Short Story, now in its 19th year, celebrates short stories and Canadian writers in the landscape that inspired Alice Munro. The annual short story contest is a cornerstone of the festival, providing incentive and recognition for the next generation of Canadian short story writers. You can find out more about the festival by following us on Facebook or checking out our website, alicemunrofestival.ca. I would like to start this afternoon's event by acknowledging that Huron County, the land where we are coming from to you from today, is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Neutral peoples. We recognize the First Peoples' continued stewardship of the land and water, and that this territory was subject to the dish with one spoon wampum, under which multiple nations agreed to care for the land and resources by the Great Lakes in peace. We would also like to acknowledge and recognize the Upper Canada Treaty signed in regards to this land, which include Treaty Number 29 and Treaty 45.5, and our roles as treaty people, committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation, gratitude, and respect with all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people. Our thoughts lie with everyone impacted by the tragic news that emerged over the past week regarding the former Kamloops residential school. I would now like to turn it over to the moderator for this afternoon's event, Nancy Fisher. Nancy is a longtime Alice Munro Festival Organizing Committee member and was responsible for coordinating the annual short story contest for a few of those years. She had a break from those duties over the past couple of years when they were taken over by Alan Whalen. But when Alan moved on to a new role a couple of months ago, Nancy stepped back into the role of short story coordinator, much to the rest of the organizing committee's relief. Thank you very much, Nancy. Enjoy this afternoon's event, and congratulations to all of our winners.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Alice Munro Festival of the Short Story, where we celebrate short stories and Canadian writers in the landscape that inspired Alice Munro. My name is Nancy Fisher, and I will be your host this afternoon. And thank you, Rick, for those lovely words. For the past 19 years, we've been hosting the very best of Canadian writers to share their works through readings, and as well as nurturing and promoting emerging writers through workshops and this very contest. And today, we are down to 6 very excited finalists for today's announcements. If you are one of the winners, you will have been notified that you're in the top 3 of each of your categories. And if you are here in the virtual audience, could you let the text know by saying so here in the comments section, and when your name is announced, you'll have the opportunity to say a few words. First, we will begin with the youth contest, and it's my great pleasure to introduce our celebrity judge. I'm very happy to introduce our celebrity judge for the youth portion of the short story contest, Heather Smith. Originally from Newfoundland, Heather was a reluctant reader who mastered her rocky relationship with words to become a highly successful writer of books for children and young adults. Her novel, Ebb Flow, won the TD Canadian Children's Literature Award, and her young adult novel, The Agony of Bun O'Keefe, won the 2019 White Pine Award. These days, Heather lives in Waterloo with her husband and 3 children, but still has very close ties to her beloved East Coast that inspires much of her writing. Heather, I will hand it over to you to announce the winners of the short story contest for youth.
Well, thank you very much. I'm so excited to be here. First of all, I want to thank the Alice Munro Festival of the Short Story for inviting me to judge the youth contest. And I also want to thank all of the youth that entered. I had an amazing time reading all of your stories. I was really impressed with the variety and the depth in which you all wrote. And I want to tell you to keep writing. Choosing the top 3 was not that easy, but it was my job and I had to do it. So I did it, and I have the results here. So I'm going to read the 3rd place, then the 2nd place, and then the 1st place winner. And I have some comments about each. So I'm not going to leave you waiting. I'm going to start with the 3rd place winner, The Unknown Lover by Adam Mulugeta. The beginning of The Unknown Lover puts the reader smack dab in the middle of a domestic drama. We learn fairly early on that the main character suspects her partner is having an affair. The feelings that go with that, the jealousy, disappointment, and fear, are palpable. Taking center stage is Amber's anger, which is quickly followed with a plan of revenge. The Unknown Lover is not your average tale of a lover scorned, however. In the hands of author Adam Mulugeta, it becomes something entirely different. At the end of this piece, there is a surprising twist. A single last line that is clever and amusing and changes everything. And once you read it, you're going to want to reread the whole piece again. So bravo, Adam. The Unknown Lover is clever and quirky piece of writing, and I hope your writing continues to take you and your readers to surprising places. Okay, I see Adam, has given us a little clap. So I will continue on to the second place. Second place goes to Summers in July by Ming Shen. So this piece begins with a beautifully written reflection of time spent between two friends during the summer-soaked days of July. It's drenched in nostalgia, and these memories give the reader a sense of glory days gone by. But this feel-good feeling quickly dissipates when there is a surprising and tragic turn of events. No longer are we in the world of...
Terry, what?
We're getting our second shots. Is it the 15th or is it...
No longer are we in the world of pinky promises and saccharine smiles. Instead, Ming Shen takes us on a thrilling and terrifying roller coaster ride. A dark and compelling read, Summers in July is sure to bring goosebumps to the arms of the bravest readers. So well done, Ming. Summers in July is a dark, exciting, well-written story. All the best with your future stories. I'm sure they'll continue to thrill. Okay. So the first place, wow, this piece took my breath away. First place is Sunglasses by Margaret Zhang. In this piece, the author gives the reader a realistic and insightful portrayal of what it is to be lonely. The main character's keen awareness of the world around them, the changing of the season, the suburban setting, is skillfully written. On the surface, these observations could be seen as the main character's deep connection to their surrounding. Instead, Margaret Zhang cleverly uses this hyper-awareness to heighten the protagonist's sense of loneliness. In the background of this piece, there is an allusion to young love. It is intentionally vague. It hints at something painful, a breakup perhaps. And the thread doesn't take center stage in the story, nor should it. It is a quiet and mysterious hum that only adds to the tension. A moody and meditative piece, Sunglasses gives the reader a snapshot of what it is like to be outside of oneself. But it's not all doom and gloom. In one final scene, we see the main character is comforted by a flickering fire and some warm broth. And it's a welcome reminder that sometimes the things we find monotonous in life can be the very same things that bring us comfort and can bandage the loneliness. So congratulations, Margaret. Sunglasses is a deep, thoughtful, compelling read. And I want to thank you for sharing your talent with us through this skillfully written and contemplative piece. Yay, Margaret. Congratulations to all.
See that Margaret Zhang is in the comments. Would you like to say something, Margaret?
Thank you guys so much for the award. It was kind of about the nostalgia and loneliness I was feeling about going to university and not really having all of my childhood, environments near me. So I'm just really thankful that you guys are recognizing, my feelings. But thank you. And congratulations to all the finalists.
Thank you, Margaret. That's lovely. And congratulations to you and to all the winners of those very enjoyable stories. I had the opportunity to have a little sneak peek read after the judges, and I was very impressed by the talent that we have selected here today. I invite everyone to visit the website for the Alice Munro Festival, where we will be posting all the winning stories sometime next week. Next, I would like to welcome our next celebrity judge. Born in Ireland in 1969 and the youngest of 8 children, Emma DONOGHUE earned her BA at the University College Dublin and, in 1997, a PhD from the University of Cambridge. A professional writer all her adult life, she has a long list of both works and awards. Her writing includes novels, short fiction, nonfiction, plays, and screenplays. Well, there just doesn't seem to be a form of writing that Emma has not turned her hand to and excelled at. After spending her early years living between Ireland and England and Canada, she settled permanently in London, Ontario in 1998, where she lives with her wife, Chris, and their 2 children. Today, Emma will be reading from her latest novel, The Pull of the Stars. In 1918, the First World War and the Great Flu are taking their toll on the patients and staff of a large Dublin hospital, and midwife nurse Julia Power finds herself on her own and in charge of the maternity and fever ward. I'm looking forward to discussing this wonderful book with her, and then Emma will announce the winners of the adult portion of the contest. Welcome, Emma Donoghue.
Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, everyone. I'm sorry I look so blurry. I'm looking at myself and it looks as if I have Vaseline thickly put over my camera, which I don't. Anyway, I assure you that mentally I'm absolutely here. Nothing foggy about my enjoyment of this occasion and the celebration of the short story. When I was growing up in Ireland, short stories felt like the dominant form. And so it's been a bit, miserable over the years at times to think that they're kind of, not the easiest form to sell. I've had publishers sometimes groan when I offer them a book of short stories. So I absolutely love to be in the company of short story enthusiasts and to see that it's absolutely flourishing as a form. So yes, I'm going to read just a little chunk, less than 10 minutes from The Pull of the Stars, set in 1918. And it just so happens to be about a pandemic. I didn't have any prescience at all. It's just I like to write about, terrible things that have happened. And this year, it just so happened that the one I'd written about, starting the book in 2018, it happened to come out in July 2020. So no deep prescience about our civilization, I'm afraid, just pure fluke. Because so many of those short stories entered for this year's prize were superb studies of family, I thought I would read you a little family section. So Julia Power works at a hospital, but she lives with her brother. And actually, just before I start, can everyone hear me okay? Give me a few thumbs. Yes, a few nods. Okay, great. Because my image is so blurry, I was just checking that verbally I'm coming through. Yeah, Julia lives with her brother, and he's a veteran of the First World War, and he doesn't speak. He has what we'd probably call traumatic mutism. So the challenge in this conversation was to see how I would write a conversation with one entirely non-verbal character. So he's called Tim. Here we go. Oh, and Julia, on her way home, is thinking about the fact that she's turning 30 the next day. I asked myself whether I minded about tomorrow's birthday. The real question was whether I was going to regret it if I never got married. But how could I possibly know for sure until it was too late? Which wasn't reason enough to do it, to throw myself headlong at every half-viable prospect the way some women did. Regret seemed all too likely either way. When I let myself into our narrow terraced house, it smelled cold, candle stubs burnt in jam jars. My brother Tim was scratching his magpie's glossy head at the table. Evening, Tim. He nodded. Odd how one took conversation for granted. A ribbon held taut between two people until it was cut. I mentioned too perkily, rather a red letter day. Sister Finnegan was needed up in maternity, so yours truly found herself promoted to acting ward sister. Tim's eyebrows jogged up and down. I had this awful habit of making up for my brother's lack of chatter by doubling my own. The trick was not to ask questions, or only safe questions to which I could guess the answers. For instance, I asked him, "How's your bird?" I didn't know if he'd given his magpie a name in his head. Tim didn't meet my eyes very often, but he could manage a half smile. Back in the summer, he had found the enormous creature in the alley, grounded by a banjaxed leg. He'd bought it a rusty rabbit hutch to roost in, and he kept the door tied open with a piece of string so the magpie could come and go as it pleased. Its sheeny green tail was always knocking things over. The magpie also did its business wherever it liked, and whenever I complained it was a menace, Tim pretended not to hear. I'd been looking forward to something hot tonight after work, but clearly the gas was off again. What about the water? I tried the tap, only a dribble. Damn and blast it. It was a luxury to let myself curse off shift, to shed the guise of nurse power and just be Julia. Tim had a saucepan still hot on the Primus stove. He lit the kerosene flame to bring the water back to the boil for tea. I pushed aside the notebook that was always on the kitchen table for writing notes. Mine were frequent and chatty, Tim's rare and sparse. Whatever was locking his throat since the war had the same grip on his writing hand, clearly. I remarked into the silence. Awfully busy today at the hospital. I lost one patient from convulsions. Tim shook his head in sympathy. But it could have gone a lot worse, really, I said. I would have liked to tell Tim about the odd redhead who'd helped me today, but an uneducated girl with cracked shoes raised in a home, lodging at a convent. Bridie might sound as if she were the opening line of a joke. I couldn't seem to find words for her, so I said nothing. Tim took saucepan lids off 2 plates and set them down at our places. He'd waited all this long, dark evening to eat tepid food with his big sister. But he didn't care for gush, so all I said was, "Oh, Tim, you've outdone yourself. Runner beans." Another faint smile. Before the war, my brother had been rather more quick-witted and chipper than I was. "So you must have been at the allotment today," I said. We only had 1/8 of an acre, but Tim worked wonders. Potatoes were as scarce as gold nuggets these days. Tonight's ones were perfect dimpled little globes the size of acorns, barely boiled, skin still crisp to the teeth. There were onions too, of course. We had them coming out our ears. And the lettuce was holed with a few slug bites, but tasted ever so alive. "Look at this," I said, "celery. They've started selling celery as a nerve cure. Would you believe it?" I thought that might amuse my brother, but his face stayed blank. Maybe the notion of shattered nerves hit too close to the bone. At the military hospital, they'd called it war neurosis. It could take a bewildering variety of forms, they told me. Even civilians got it. They had dosed Tim with chloral to prevent the nightmares, or at least make him forget the details when he woke up groggy. It gave him a perpetually queasy stomach. They gave him massages to soothe and walks to invigorate and hypnosis to get his mind back on track. Also lessons in brushmaking, carpentry, boot repair. He'd been discharged a few months after. Since he was fairly able compared to so many other men, the psychologist had admitted he could do nothing for Tim's speechlessness and they needed the bed. The prescription was rest, nourishment, and congenial occupation. I'd weaned Tim very gradually off the sedative, so these days he was rather less jumpy, though he still couldn't stand crowds. He was rather more able to eat, especially if I ate with him. I just had to trust that quiet and pottering about, gardening, shopping, cooking, cleaning, tending his magpie, would mend him in time. "Anything come in the post this morning?" I asked. My brother shook his head and made a gesture with his hands, but I didn't follow. Pointing into the hall, he shook his head again, almost crossly. Never mind, Tim," I said. But he was scraping back his chair and tugging out the table's shallow drawer, the one that always stuck. "It doesn't matter, really," I said. I couldn't bear it when Tim had to grab the notebook to make himself understood to me, the nearest thing to a mammy he'd ever had. It made me feel we were thousands of miles apart. He slid his jagged handwriting over now so I could read what he'd written. Temporary suspension. "Oh, of the post. Oh, of delivery of the post. I see. I suppose there are too many off sick with the flu at the sorting office, are they?" "At the hospital," I said, "we'd never be allowed a suspension of service, not even for a day. Ours are the gates that can't close." I wondered how long it would take me to remember not to ask Tim whether any post had come that day during this suspension. How many weeks before I stopped missing the post? That was how civilization might grind to a halt, I thought. One rusted up little cog at a time. I'm going to leave that there. I am happy to have any chat or questions about that or about anything at all before we move on with the judging bit.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Emma. And I'm so happy that you read that portion with Tim, because he really is a very important character in the novel that never really says anything. But he to me, he was the bedrock that Julia could stand on to go do the very difficult work that she had to do. So that's a very nice portion of the book to read.
No, you're so right. And it's funny, reviews and so on tend to always focus on the main character, but actually a huge amount gets done in the shadows in any piece of fiction, and you see this even in short stories, that there'll be some tiny little scene with a secondary character, but it's actually crucial. So it's not all about the stars in a piece of fiction.
Of course. Now, this is going to be the question that you're going to get most often about this book, but the extraordinary timing of you mentioned it when you opened. Writing about this period and this topic. Was it the centenary of the Spanish flu that started you down this road? I mean, it's not the first time you've written about an epidemic.
No, it's true. I've written about a smallpox epidemic in San Francisco in the 1870s. I mean, I'm drawn to medical storylines. I've now done 2 novels from the point of view of nurses because, I mean, it's easy to explain, but the high stakes of life and death stories, and also nursing is a really interesting job in women's history because it was always seen as just a kind of a natural, offshoot of women's ability to care. And therefore you didn't need to pay them well or give them proper training or respect or anything. So it's a funny in-between job. It's crucial and yet, has often not been very powerful. So even in 1918, Julia is well trained, but she's really overworked and underpaid and has to kowtow to doctors who couldn't place the cervix in a diagram, So, I find medical dramas irresistible, and an epidemic adds a particular kind of ethical twist to a storyline because people's least decisions and behaviors have a huge effect on other people. In a way, an epidemic emphasizes how connected we all are. Every tiny little social connection forming this huge web, which so many of us have missed so much the last year and a half. So in a way, an epidemic is an amazing way to kind of make visible all those subtle little links between people and how much we need not just our nearest and dearest, but those little everyday chats as well. And it's funny, I didn't see this COVID coming at all, but all year, well, the last year and a half, reading the headlines about COVID, I've been often reminded of 1918 because every single epidemic, they act as a kind of an X-ray for a society, showing up where we've chosen to spend our money and who we've chosen to neglect. So the people who die in epidemics, it's not random at all. It's a making visible of the unfairness of our system. So I think, in a way, whatever era I had chosen to write about, if I looked at issues of who lives and dies when there are germs on the loose, it would create the same kind of story and the same kind of quite political analysis. Yeah,
I agree. And it's absolutely amazing when you're reading the book to see the connections between her being concerned about whether or not she can get parts for her bicycle. Now, that was more to do with the war because it was a German-made bicycle, and things that we can't find today that have been shortage because of the pandemic. So often, historical novels are sweeping epics covering an entire area or multi-generations, but this is an intense story, and it's condensed to a very short period of time, over 3 days, mostly within the maternity and fever ward of a hospital. Other novels of yours, where mother and son are confined to a single room, or The Wonder, where a girl and a nurse are in a cramped bedroom, one intently watching the other. Does confining your stories and creating parameters in time and place in such a way help you to sharpen the focus of the drama?
It does, and it focuses on human relationships, and often very intense relationships of, say, parenting or medical care. I think, just to generalize about women's history in particular, many women's lives have been smaller than they would like rather than bigger. They have contained too little travel, too little freedom, too little employment rather than too much. So in writing novels, which are quite focused on women before the 20th century, they're going to include a lot of stifling rooms, and bored, frustrated, highly able people. And of course, fiction is wonderful for sort of lighting up those shadowy corners and showing you what's going on in the head of somebody who's, whose society wouldn't see them as important or interesting. So yeah, confinement it works as a literary technique, quite apart from the content of the lives I'm writing about. It sort of increases I always think of that concept of Brownian motion in classes at school, that basically all the little particles start banging off the walls. If you trap even people who don't know each other, if you trap them in an elevator, you're going to get some interesting conversations by 10 minutes in. And similarly with something like Award, people they'll get to know each other quite fast. So one reason that The Pull of the Stars takes only 3 days is that's, I thought, about a plausible time in which people might fall in love. But equally, I thought it was just about plausible enough time for somebody to catch the flu and die of it. So I was trying to see how much of life and death I could squeeze into 3 days. I was also trying to capture how birth is not just, in TV shows, birth tends to be a big splash of the waters breaking, one scream, and then a beautiful baby. So I was trying to capture the fact that it can be more of a long distance marathon event. With lots of stopping and starting and lots of hard work.
For certain, and we certainly see the detail that you go into in the verse throughout the story and through the 3 days. In some ways, it reminds me a little bit of short fiction in that, that condensed focus is, your novels are like short fiction in long form.
In a way, I think all fiction writers should be forced to work on short stories first. They are the best possible training. You can't possibly be baggy or lazy or lose focus, Yeah. I don't in any way mean that short story is just the apprenticeship. I mean, often there's no higher form of literature, but I do think they insist on a kind of a technical rigor that you could perhaps not be as aware of if you started writing a novel. So I think they maybe they're like the sprints of racing,
Agreed. You often take historical events or figures and work stories around them. In this novel, we meet Dr. Kathleen Lynn, a fascinating woman. I mean, a medical doctor when not many women were, a suffragette, a Sinn Féin politician, founder of a children's hospital. Did you find her along the way of the research, or were you aware of her and planned to put her in the story? And I'd also like to mention that instead of making her the central character and using all the well-documented material we have about her life and writing a story around that, did you find that it was good to weave her in and out of the story to really bring forth those ideas that she had about women in poverty and healthcare into that fictional storyline?
This is a great example of how, even if you're a big planner, writers often distinguish between planners and pantsers, and I'm a super planner, but still things happen you didn't plan. So no, this was always going to be the story of a midwife. I just knew I needed a few doctors as background. And I was not looking for real people for this novel at all, because the pandemic itself required such a lot of me. I had to be so accurate about things and get so much medical detail right. I wasn't looking to also, frankly, tie my hands by sticking to the facts of a real person's life. So just for background research, I come across Kathleen Lynn, and she wouldn't stay out of the book then. She kept barging in saying, as it happens, I'm running a flu clinic with my lifelong partner. As it happens, I'm working on vaccines for the flu. As it happens, I have a passionate interest in poverty and child health. So she was just relevant to everything that was going on in the book. So I decided it was at least plausible that she would come and work at this fictional hospital for a couple of days, because no Dublin hospital had hired her full time, because none of the men wanted a female colleague. So she was roundabout and on the run from police, would you believe, during the weeks my novel is set. So I thought it was plausible that a multitasker like Kathleen Lynn would manage to pop in and work in the hospital I'm writing about for a few days. And also she gets to add a kind of a breadth of knowledge to it. She knows that the German forces, for instance, cremate their dead. She knows the bigger picture. She knows how the death rate of babies in Dublin was worse than that of men in the trenches. So she can make that kind of statistical observation. With historical fiction, you have to be really careful not to have characters ever, say a fact unless it is something that they would be likely to take an interest in. You can't have them operate as human footnotes. So yes, Kathleen, then I'm so glad I let her into the book, as it were. I was in no way going looking for her, but you have to be open to these encounters.
Well, I'll be looking to read more about her because now I'm quite fascinated by her life and her work. As I was pulling together the questions, I was not really sure what to ask about Bridie Sweeney. I felt bad because she's that secondary character that wasn't a nurse, midwife, wasn't the doctor, but at the same time, she was indispensable to Julia for those 3 days. And she is the character that's still living in my head. And thinking about children, especially right now, living in horrible situations not of their own making. I don't really have a question, but I wanted to know what you thought about Bridie's contribution to the story.
Sure. Yeah, she's in a way, she's us. She's the way in because she knows nothing. She doesn't know how to clean a thermometer. She's ignorant of all these things. So it's very helpful to have an absolutely ignorant outsider saying, "What's that? Where do I put this? Which way is up?" Bridie knows nothing, and Bridie doesn't even know that babies are, alive and moving inside a woman before birth. She's utterly ignorant, and she's the only character I've ever written based on a government inquiry. Ireland, just like Canada, has its appalling history of residential institutions where we locked up not any particular ethnic group, but basically our poor. So we have, an appalling kind of network of mother and baby homes, orphanages, so-called Magdalene hospitals. And I decided that Bridie would be from that sort of pipeline because in setting a novel in a very good charitable institution, which is a hospital, you also have to look at the dark side of institutions and all the crimes they committed in the name of charity. So I decided to make Bridie someone who's come out of that system, and yet, she has all sorts of forms of damage, but she has also a huge amount to give. And above all, for the first time in being a volunteer at this hospital during the flu pandemic, she feels useful. She has meaningful work, and she gets to feel like she's important and that she's saving lives, which is, probably an amazing form of healing. Is to focus on what you do still miraculously have in you to give.
She was a wonderful character, and I just loved her. So as Nurse Julia goes back and forth for the few times they're outside of the hospital, not a lot, she often reads posters around the hospital on her way home with lovely bits of good advice kind of wrapped up in a bit of a rhyme or some kind of alliterative prose. They're basically propaganda posters and phrases. Certainly not the pithy keep calm and carry on that we see so often on mugs and tea towels. Were these actual posters that you found in your research?
No, they're invented by me, but they're all based on government statements, not just from Ireland, but I remember using some from Argentina. A lot of American ones were rhyming, about coughs and sneezes, spread diseases. So I tried to use the qualities of all these different government information often posters, but sometimes pamphlets, because they have a weird amount in common, and there's so much in common with what governments say during COVID as well. There's the false reassurance, utterly vague reassurance, and there's vague victim blaming as well. I remember Boris Johnson in the UK this year telling people to stay alert, as if you could see the germs coming through the air. There's a lot of blaming people for their pre-existing health conditions or for the conditions in which they live. Like Irish posters would say things like, seek out fresh air and sunshine. And I think, where? If you live in a slum in Dublin in November, where's the sunshine? So, I tried to capture the almost kind of universal mind games of governments trying to keep you calm and reassured, and yet in fear of your life, and also feeling it's your own fault if you catch it. It's a curious thing. And I was trying to capture the sort of dark comedy of it as well. So sometimes I was just taking a situation that was rather absurd and just literally squeezing the words tighter together. So I think I came up with the line, the public is advised to stay out of public places, because that's the joke of living under lockdowns, is that the very things that make us a public or a community are suddenly harmful to us. So it's a bizarre situation, and, little humor helps.
Yes. And they're very humorous. And finally, I just want to ask one more thing about actually another book. There's been some news recently around a Netflix production of your novel, The Wonder, potentially starring Florence Pugh as Nurse Libright. So how are you feeling, and what do you think about The Wonder becoming a Netflix small screen event?
I've been working on this movie for years, and you think of Netflix as small screen as opposed to big, but really Netflix is a big film producer these days, and they do cinema releases for their more prestigious projects. And given that we have Florence Pugh as our star, she's Oscar nominated for Little Women. We have Sebastian Lelio from Chile as our director. I've worked very closely with him on the script, and he won Oscar for Best Foreign Film. So it's a very prestigious lineup of people making this. I'm making it with the same company that I made Room, a small but very powerful Irish company called Element. So I feel on really sure ground that this is going to be a great film, and it's not going to be your typical historical film at all. So yes, it's filming in Ireland this summer. I have my tickets to go if I can only get the vaccines in time, and I'm so excited this has all come together, because films are so expensive. It always seems unlikely that they will finally get greenlit. So when I heard back in, I think, February that we were getting the nod from Netflix, I was just so thrilled, because the typical situation in film is that you work for years and years and then all possibility just drains away. So it's always just so unlikely and amazing when it comes together and you realize it's actually going to hit the screen, It's another film that revolves around a child. We have an 11-year-old child at the heart of it. So that always makes the casting a bit nerve-wracking. But as with the amazing Jake Tremblay from Vancouver, who starred in Room, I think we've got a stunning child this time. And I'm just so excited about this.
That's very exciting news, and we can all look forward to that from Netflix very soon. And thank you so much for talking to me about The Pull of the Stars, and I hope other people get a chance to read it if they haven't already. You can always purchase all of the books from all of the authors, Heather and Emma included, through the Village Bookshop in Bayfield. You can also borrow a lot of the books through the Huron County Library if you're local to Huron County. Thank you both. And now, Emma, I'm going to ask you, if you're ready, to proceed into announcing the winners of the adult portion of the Alice Munro Festival of the Short Story Contest.
Thank you, Nancy. This was such a treat. Because I'm not a judge every year, I have no idea, is the standard always this high? But frankly, I was amazed at the sort of consistent brilliance of the stories I was being shown. And a very interesting kind of set of themes in that many of them turned out to be about family in its broadest sense, and kind of painful differences between generations, and often with immigration involved too. So it was painfully difficult to choose a top three. I had about 6 that I kept returning to, but I just had to in the end. And again, ranking them, it's like 3 different beautiful fruit in a bowl, very painful. So anyway, in third place, I have put Landscape of Extremes by Linda Walsh. This is a highly atmospheric tale of a doomed marriage between a Mexican man and an American woman. And it's full of what makes the good writer stand out, unforgettable little vivid images. And there's a shot out cow carcass, for instance, and there are mice gathering seeds in the moonlight. And this story, Landscape of Extremes, is told from the highly dramatic point of view of their grown-up daughter, who is herself culturally hybrid, and she's full of pain at what she's lost by leaving Mexico, not only her mother, but her homeland and a very important side of herself. So huge congratulations to Linda Walsh. I believe we have Linda here today to speak. Well done.
Congratulations, Linda. Would you like to say something? You might be muted on your end, perhaps.
Okay, got it.
There you go.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Emma. It's a pleasure to hear you read, and it's an honor to be here. And congratulations to all the finalists, and also to all the people who finished their stories and sent them in. And keeping storytelling alive. And also a big, big thank you to everyone who helped organize this festival, and of course to the judges who spent so much time and care in reading our stories, and it must have been a tough job. And it really was lovely to imagine Emma Donoghue, such a fine writer, reading my story. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Well done. In second place, the story I chose was Up Roxham Road by Zahida Rahmatullah. I hope I'm not murdering your name, Rahida. I know Donoghue is pronounced in many, many different ways, so I really doubt I'm getting yours right. but the story was just fantastic. Up Roxham Road is named for the famous crossing point between New York State and Quebec, across which so many asylum seekers streamed, especially in the 2010s, in hopes that their chances of being allowed to stay in Canada would be better that way than if they tried a legitimate point of entry. And the story, very interestingly, is told from the perspective not of one of the asylum seekers, but of their wry-troubled taxi driver, Sumit, who is described as merely being from the Indian subcontinent. But the thing about Sumit is he's been settled in the US for more than 3 decades. So he's not the local you would expect as a contrast with the refugees, and he's not a brand new one. He's interestingly in the middle. He's a very interesting linchpin. Up Roxham Road is a really thoughtful story, very subtle about the different waves of immigrants in all our countries and the complex psychology of those who either help or hinder them. And I was deeply impressed by this story. So well done on second place for Up Roxham Road, Zahida Rahemtullah. Do we have you?
I don't believe.
Yes, hi. Thanks, Emma. You didn't murder my name. That's right. And I'm sorry. I'm just walking to work, and I've been tuning in while I'm walking there. But I just wanted to say thanks to Emma, a big fan. Thanks to everyone at the Alice Munro Festival Short Story. It seems like a really hardworking team there. And thanks to your support and for supporting the form of the short story.
Okay, that's so classy. Tuning in as you walk to work, what a great example of the multitasking modern writer who has all the more to write about because they've got so much going on. Wow. Okay, so finally, the grand prize goes to Andrea Reynolds for a story simply called Remember. And I've been trying to put my finger for a week or two on exactly what is so clever about this story's structure. So at first you think, Remember is going to be the study of a controlling husband's abusive grip on his wife. And it is that. But then it's also the story of a wife forced to care for a husband whose dementia is getting worse. And it's also the story of their grown child becoming aware of the complicated truth of the parents' marriage. And it's these 3 storylines knotted together in a way that stops any one of those stories from being obvious or sappy. So it's a technical marvel. Remember is like a mini novel in 10 pages, which is something that we always say of Alice Munro's short stories. And I would like to offer my very, very warmest congratulations to this year's winner of the Alice Munro Festival of the Short Story Contest. Let me try that again. Okay. I would like to offer my very warmest congratulations to this year's winner of the Alice Munro Festival of the Short Story Contest, Andrea Reynolds.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really overwhelmed and surprised. And I'd just like to say thank you to the Alice Munro Festival organizers, sponsors, and Judge, you, Emma, for making this amazing opportunity for emerging writers happen. I wrote a story about the complications that illness can bring to an already troubled marriage, and I am so very honored that it was selected for a prize. As a very new writer, not a very young writer, but a very new writer, this recognition just encourages me to keep writing and gives me a confidence boost, and I so very much greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well, that's all from me. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this. All you Alice Munro Festival people, this was a real treat.
Well, thank you very much, Emma. I have to say that both Emma and Heather were a delight to work with. I can't say enough nice things about how responsive they were and how fantastic they were to work with. So you may get asked to be judges again. You never know. And I'd also like to say very much a thank you to our preliminary judges. For the youth portion, I would like to thank Julianne Morris and Rick Hundy, who weeded through all the youth entries. And for the adult portion of the competition, Michael Mild, Melanie Kinderchuk, Andrea Bruce, and Courtney Ward-Zibanoff, who went through the hundreds of entries that we have every year to narrow it down for our celebrity judges. A hearty congratulations to all the winners of this year's Alice Munro Short Story Contest. And as I mentioned before, the entries will be published on the website sometime next week, so that everyone can have an opportunity to read these really excellent stories. And I hope you take that opportunity. I'd like to thank some of our sponsors. That this festival just simply couldn't happen without these sponsors. So the County of Huron, of course, the Township of North Huron, the Ontario Arts Council, Dr. Marie Greer, Royal Homes and Capital Power, and of course many others around the community, including Schenck Legal, Hurontel, Crawford Mills and Davis Law Office. It takes a community to make this festival happen every year, even during a pandemic. We hope very much that next year we will be live again with all of our authors and you, our audience who enjoys reading, and will come to Huron County to celebrate short stories with us. Copies of all the books are available again at the Village Bookshop. You can go online or call them, and they are happy to help you with those purchases. Or if you're local, check out the books at the Huron County Library. That's going to be it for the short story contest for this year. Thank you very much for tuning in, and stay safe and keep reading.